You people never learn, do you?" She said it loud enough for the whole lobby to hear, loud enough for the receptionist behind the marble desk to look up, loud enough for the 3 men in suits near the elevator bank to turn their heads, loud enough for every single person in that glass tower atrium to stop what they were doing and stare at the old man on his knees wringing out a mop. He didn't flinch. He didn't straighten up too fast, didn't drop the mop, didn't look startled in the way of a man who hadn't been spoken to like that before. He simply looked up at her, slow and steady, the way a mountain looks at weather. His eyes were dark and calm and very, very old. She didn't like that look. She reached into her handbag, pulled out a thin leather planner, the kind with gold initials pressed into the cover, and dropped it right into the soapy water on the floor, on purpose. She smiled and said, "Clean that up too." He looked down at it. He looked back up at her. He did not say a word. Nobody in that lobby moved. Nobody spoke. A woman near the coffee cart put down her cup. One of the suited men turned slightly away, as if looking at something urgent in the distance. She had no idea who he was. No idea at all. In less than 40 minutes, a man in a $2,000 suit would step off that elevator, cross this same lobby floor, walk directly past her, and take that old man's face in both hands. She would never forget what he said next. "Have you ever been dismissed because of how you looked? Have you ever been made small in a room full of people who watched and said nothing? Let me take you back, 8 hours earlier. The city woke up slowly in November. The kind of slow that comes from cold air pressing down on everything, from sidewalks still wet from the night before, from a sky that couldn't quite decide whether it wanted to be gray or just a slightly darker gray. On Clement Street, in the Richmond district of San Francisco, the lights in the laundromat were already on at 5:15 in the morning. They were always on by 5:15. The owner, Mrs. Yee, would tell anyone who asked that the machine on the far left, the one with the broken lid you had to hold down with your elbow, needed an extra 20 minutes for a full load, and if you wanted your clothes dry by 7, you had to be there before the sun. Ellington James was always there before the sun. He was 67 years old, with hands that had been large once and were still large now. Though the knuckles were swollen at the joints in a way that made cold mornings slow, he wore the same thing every weekday: dark work trousers, a gray thermal shirt under a blue uniform jacket with the Pinnacle Solutions logo stitched above the left breast pocket. The jacket was pressed. It was always pressed. Not because the job required it. The job didn't require it. But Ellington had been pressing his work clothes since 1981, since the morning his father drove him to his first paying job at a hotel downtown, and he had said, in the voice of a man who did not waste words, "Whatever they call you in this life, make sure they can't call you untidy." His father's name was Robert James. Everyone called him Bobby. He had been a janitor his whole life. A janitor and a deacon at Bethel Baptist and a trumpet player who had once sat in at a Monday night session with a man named Miles back in 1959 at a club in the Fillmore that wasn't there anymore. Bobby James died in 1994, age 72, and on the day of his funeral more people came than the church could hold. They stood in the parking lot in the rain and nobody left. Ellington carried his father the way some men carry a watch, not as a display but as a reckoning. A quiet check against the drift. He finished his laundry, folded everything on the table by the window with the same precision he applied to everything else. He walked the 6 blocks home, made 2 eggs on a gas stove that was older than his daughter, drank 1 cup of coffee standing at the kitchen sink, and looked out through the gap in the buildings at a slice of bay that was still dark and mirror flat. On the counter beside his coffee cup was a small brass medallion, about the size of a silver dollar, worn smooth on one side from being held, on the other side barely visible now after 30 years. An engraved trumpet with 2 initials beneath it, R.J. His father had carried it every day of his working life. Ellington had carried it every day since the funeral. He pressed his thumb against it now, turned it over once, set it down. Then he picked it up again and put it in his front shirt pocket, where it always rode during a shift. He left the house at 6:45. He arrived at the Pinnacle Solutions Tower at 7 sharp, signed in at the service entrance, and had his cart loaded and his first floor mopped before most of the building's tenants had settled into their chairs. He worked the way his father had worked, quietly, methodically, without drawing attention. The Pinnacle Tower had 42 floors. Ellington and his crew of 4 handled the first 12. He had been here 11 years. In 11 years he had learned the rhythms of the building the way a musician learns a room, where the acoustics changed, which hours brought traffic, which floors went quiet first. He knew which executive always brought soup from the deli on Powell and ate it at his desk by noon. He knew the receptionist on the 4th floor kept a small radio in her drawer and played it low on Friday afternoons. He knew that the executive suite on the 12th floor, corner office, floor-to-ceiling glass was cleaned last, after 7 p.m. Because the man who used that office sometimes worked past midnight and preferred not to be interrupted. He had never met that man. In 11 years their schedules had never overlapped. He had cleaned the office 800 times and never seen it occupied. He didn't think much about it. That was the nature of the work. You maintained things that other people used. You made the world presentable. His father had called it ministry, said it with a straight face, and Ellington had understood eventually that he was not joking. The lobby, though, was different. The lobby he did in the morning, during the long hour when the building went from empty to full. People moved around him the way water moves around a stone, most of them without noticing the stone at all. Some nodded. A few, over the years, had learned his name. Most had not. That was fine. Ellington was not there to be noticed. He was there to make the floors clean. He was wringing out the mop at 8:47, working his way toward the east wall of the atrium when the doors opened. She came in the way certain people come into rooms, as though the room had been waiting for her to arrive and could now properly begin. Her name was Courtney Ashworth Lane, and she was the kind of woman who made a point of knowing the name of the maitre d' at every restaurant that mattered. The kind of woman for whom on the list was not a metaphor. She was 43 years old, wore a cream-colored coat that cost more than Ellington made in 2 months, and carried a handbag that was the precise shade of a bruise and worth more than his car. She was a consultant. She had been contracted by Pinnacle Solutions for the past 3 months to lead a restructuring assessment of the company's operational and administrative overhead. She didn't particularly like this building. She didn't particularly like anything about this assignment. She had been told the company was in transition, which was a soft word for something complicated she intended to have an opinion about before anyone else in the room had formed one. She was on the phone when she came through the revolving door. She was still on the phone when she crossed the lobby. She was not watching where she was going. Her heel hit the edge of the wet floor sign, the yellow caution triangle Ellington had placed 4 feet from the area he was mopping, and she stumbled, not falling, just catching herself, but enough that she knocked her shoulder into the marble top side table near the east wall. Her planner slid off the table. Ellington was already moving toward it. He picked it up before it hit the floor, held it out to her, steady and quiet. She ended her call. She looked at the planner. She looked at him. She looked at the mop in his other hand, the cart behind him, the wet floor sign, the bucket, the uniform with the stitched logo, and then she said it. "You people never learn, do you?" She said it the way some people say certain things, as a statement of fact, as a weather report. As the kind of sentence you say when you are not thinking of the other person as a person at all, but as a category, a problem, an inconvenience arranged roughly in the shape of a human being. She took the planner out of his hand. She opened her handbag. Then she appeared to reconsider. She looked at him again, at the mop, at the wet floor he had been working on, and she dropped the planner. A deliberate release, fingers opening with intention directly into the soapy water at the edge of his bucket. Cleaned that up too, and she walked toward the elevator. In his front shirt pocket, resting warm against his chest, was the brass medallion. He felt it there the way he always felt it, like a hand on the shoulder, like a held note. He bent down and picked up the planner. The leather was wet. The gold-embossed letters Cal had soaked up a pale gray waterline along the bottom edge. He set it on the cart. He did not look up at her back. He picked up the mop and kept working. But here is what Ellington knew, and what Courtney Ashworth Lane did not know, and what every person in that lobby did not know, and what you, watching this unfold, cannot possibly have guessed yet in 4 hours and 13 minutes The man who owned this building was going to step off that elevator and walk across this floor. And the first thing he was going to do, before he greeted the board members, before he walked to his office, before he so much as shrugged off his coat, was walk straight to the man with the mop. And he was going to say something that would stop every person in the room. But we are not there yet. Let me tell you about what happened in the years before this morning. Because nothing you are about to see makes any sense unless you understand how far back it goes. Robert James Bobby was born in New Orleans in 1922, the third son of a man who hauled ice and a woman who took in sewing. He was playing trumpet by 9, gigging by 15, and by the time he was 22, he had the kind of sound people walked across town for. Not famous, never famous, but real. The musicians knew. You know how musicians know. In 1949, he moved to San Francisco because a friend said the Fillmore district was something you had to see to believe. And it was. It was everything. There were clubs on every block, and the music spilled out onto the sidewalks on warm nights, and Bobby James played 5 nights a week for 3 years and never once felt like he was running out of road. He met a woman named Ida in 1951. They married in 1953. In 1956, she gave birth to a boy they named Ellington, after the Duke, because Bobby James did not believe in small choices when it came to names. By 1962, the Fillmore was being redeveloped. The word they used was urban renewal. The result was that over 20,000 black residents were displaced from the neighborhood that had been the center of their lives, their businesses, their music. Clubs closed. Buildings came down. A community that had taken decades to build was disassembled in a handful of years. Bobby James lost his regular gig, then his apartment, then a second gig, then a third. He took a job cleaning offices downtown. He did it with the same seriousness he brought to the trumpet. He did it well, and he advanced, and by 1970 he was running a crew of 6, and he was still playing music on weekends. And he was still every inch the same man he had always been. He just did the work differently now. He told Ellington when Ellington was about 12 they moved the room on us. But we didn't stop playing. You understand? The room moves. You don't. Ellington did not fully understand it at 12. He understood it completely by 40. There was a period, a long period, from the time Ellington was 23 to about 30, where he worked in finance. He had graduated from San Francisco State with a degree in economics, had taken a job at an investment firm in the financial district, had worn a tie and sat at a desk and moved numbers around in a way that made other people's money grow. He was good at it. He was very good at it, actually. He had a specific gift for seeing patterns in data that other analysts missed. A kind of structural intuition for market behavior that his supervisor, a man named Garrett Hess, once described as unnerving in the best possible way. He worked there for 7 years. And then Garrett Hess retired, and the new managing director came in, and the culture changed. And Ellington found himself, subtly, then less subtly, frozen out of meetings he used to lead, left off email chains he used to anchor, assigned to work that had been quietly diminished in scope and visibility. No one said anything directly. No one ever does. But after 2 years of it, the message was clear enough that a man would have to be working very hard at not understanding it. He left. He started over. He built something different, quieter, slower, built from the ground up out of his own resources and his father's lesson about the room that moves. What he built would take 15 years to become visible to anyone outside his immediate circle, and by the time it was visible, it was significant. But we will get to that. In the years between leaving finance and where we are now, Ellington worked. He took the janitorial job at a hotel, then at an office building, then at the Pinnacle Solutions Tower, and he brought to every floor the same attention his father had brought. The pressed jacket, the methodical cart, the work done quietly and completely. He did not talk about his past at work. He was not hiding it. It simply did not come up. The work was the work. He had a daughter named Ida after his mother. She was 31 now, a pediatrician in Oakland. She called on Sundays. She called him the most stubborn man she had ever loved, and she meant it as the highest possible compliment. And in his front shirt pocket every shift was the brass medallion, the worn trumpet, the initials R. Jay, his father's voice, carried close to his heart. The morning moved on. By 10 o'clock, Ellington had finished the first floor, serviced the restrooms off the lobby, restocked the third-floor supply closet, and taken his break in the basement locker room where a small television mounted on the wall played cable news on mute with the captions on. He drank from a thermos his daughter had given him, red, insulated, with a small label on the side she had made when she was 7 that said L's Coffee in crayon, laminated now, still legible. He thought about nothing in particular. That was the skill of a long break, to think about nothing. His father had been good at that too, he thought about the planner. He did not think about the woman who had dropped it. He had known women like her, and men like her, and the specific energy she carried was not new to him. The world had never been short of people who looked at a uniform and saw only the uniform. He had decided a long time ago that that was their limitation and not his, and he had found it more or less possible to live by that decision. But he thought about the planner because it bothered him that it was wet. He had set it on his cart. He would give it to the front desk before his next floor. That was the right thing to do. That was what you did. The planner was still on his cart when he came back up. He brought it to the reception desk and set it down. The receptionist, her name was Tanya, and she had been here 3 years, and she always brought homemade oatmeal cookies at Christmas, looked at it, looked at him, and said, "Was that woman horrible to you?" He said, "Just leave it where she can find it." Tanya said, "Ellington?" He said, "It's fine, Tanya." He took his cart to the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor. He had a full morning ahead. What happened next would change every single person in this building. By 11:30, word had filtered, the way word filters in office buildings, through break rooms and bathroom conversations and glances over laptop screens, that the board of directors was convening an emergency session at noon. This happened occasionally at Pinnacle Solutions. It happened less occasionally with the particular kind of energy that was circulating now, a tight-lipped, downward-looking energy that people who worked at companies in transition learned to recognize. Courtney Ashworth Lane had been in closed meetings since 9:15. 3 executive assistants had been asked not to schedule any afternoon calls. 2 lawyers from outside the company had been seen coming through the service entrance. The regular entrance. The lawyers went up in the elevator. The lobby went quiet in that specific way lobbies go quiet when something large is about to happen and no one is saying it out loud. At 12:47, the elevator doors opened. What came out of that elevator was not the board of directors. It was not the lawyers. It was not anyone Tanya at the front desk or the security officer by the door or the half-dozen people who happened to be in the lobby at that moment had seen walk into this building before. It was a man. Tall, 50-something, silver at the temples, wearing a charcoal suit that was clearly very expensive and clearly not the point. He was followed by 2 people who walk the way assistants walk when they know something important is happening and they are trying not to show it. He came off the elevator like a man who had been somewhere important and was now somewhere more important. His name was Marcus Cole. He was the founder and chief executive officer of Cole Capital Group, one of the largest private equity firms on the West Coast. He was also, as of 6 weeks ago, the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Solutions. No one on the operations staff knew this yet. The acquisition had not been publicly announced. The board was being informed today. Courtney Ashworth Lane, in the middle of her restructuring assessment, had been working for a company that had already been sold out from under the process she was conducting, and no one had told her, and the look on her face when she stepped off a different elevator 40 seconds later and saw Marcus Cole standing in the lobby would be something that Tanya described to her mother that evening, and her mother asked her to describe 3 more times. But that came later. What happened first was this. Marcus Cole walked across the lobby floor. He walked past the reception desk. He walked past Tanya, who half rose from her chair. He walked past the security officer, past the 3 people in business clothes who were standing near the coffee cart, past Courtney Ashworth Lane, who had just arrived from the elevator bank and did not yet understand what she was seeing. He walked to Ellington James, who was crossing back through the lobby with his cart, headed for the service elevator. He put his hand on Ellington's shoulder. Ellington stopped. He turned. He looked at the man. Something moved behind his eyes, recognition, and with it, something that was not quite a smile and was more than a smile, some older and quieter expression. Marcus Cole said, "I tried to call you this morning." Ellington said, "I was on shift." "I don't carry the phone on shift, you know that." Marcus Cole said, "I know." He looked at his father for a moment. Then he said, "I wanted you to hear it from me first." He turned then to the people behind him, to the lawyers who had come in earlier and were now standing near the elevators, to the board members who had come down from the 12th floor and were standing in a loose, stunned cluster near the reception desk, to Tanya, who had both hands over her mouth, to the security officer, to the people by the coffee cart, and to Courtney Ashworth Lane, who had gone completely still. Marcus Cole put his hand on the old man's shoulder again, and he said to the room, in the same voice he used when he was addressing a room of 500 investors, "This is Ellington James. He is my father. And this company is now under Cole Capital Management." He paused. He looked at Courtney Ashworth Lane. He said, "I understand you met him this morning." The lobby was so quiet that Tanya's computer fan was audible. Courtney Ashworth Lane's face had done something. It had started as the face of a woman who had walked into a room expecting to find her day continuing. It had passed through confusion, and then through a specific kind of recognition that works its way backward through everything you've said and done in the preceding hours, and had arrived somewhere very pale and very still. She said, "I," and then she did not say anything else. But let me stop there for a moment, because this is the part of the story that matters most, and it almost never gets told correctly. It would be easy to look at this moment, the CEO walking across that lobby floor, the hand on the shoulder, the words spoken in that quiet room, and to see it as a story about a son saving his father, about power being exercised on behalf of dignity, about status arriving to do what status does. That is not the story. The story is older than that. The story starts in 1949, in the Fillmore district, with a trumpet player and a woman named Ida and a community that was taken apart and kept going anyway. It starts with a boy who was 12 years old when his father told him that the room moves but you don't. It starts with what a man carries in a front shirt pocket, and why, and what it costs to carry it quietly for 30 years. Marcus Cole did not save his father today. His father had never needed saving. His father had been exactly who he was in every room he had ever entered, in every uniform, at every floor, in every exchange with every person who looked at him and saw only the jacket with the logo stitched above the pocket. What Marcus Cole did was introduce the room to who was already in it. Ellington had never told Marcus to stay quiet about who his father was. That was an important truth that came out later, in the interviews and the articles and the eventual documentary that was made about this story. He had never asked his son to pretend. He had simply never made his son's identity his own credential. A man's child is not a name tag. A man's child is not a rank. Marcus had tried, on more than one occasion, to get his father to stop working. Ellington had declined. He had used the word ministry, and Marcus had recognized it immediately, because his grandmother Ida had used it too, and you do not argue a word that has been in a family that long. What Marcus had not known until this morning was that his father had been working in this building. The acquisition timeline had been moving for 8 months. Marcus's team had done a full operational audit. Somewhere in the staffing records was a line that read James E. Facilities and Maintenance, 11 years, and no one had flagged it, because why would they? Because a name is just a name until it is not. Marcus had seen his father's name in the records the night before. He had looked at it for a long time. Then he had called and gotten no answer and driven to San Francisco from his home in Marin at 7 in the morning and arrived at the building just in time to hear from Tanya, who was already emotional when she told him, about the woman with the cream coat and the planner and what she had said. He had asked 2 questions. He had gotten 2 answers. And then he had gone upstairs to inform the board before he came back down to find his father. 4 hours and 13 minutes. That was how long it had taken from Courtney Ashworth Lane's entrance to this moment. She had not known who she was looking at. None of them had. Now they did. The next 72 hours were what the tech press eventually called a case study in consequential transparency, which is a phrase that means exactly nothing and everything at the same time. What it actually was a reckoning. It started in the lobby. A woman named Priya, who worked in product development on the 7th floor and had been near the coffee cart during both the morning incident and the noon revelation, had filmed most of what happened at noon on her phone. She had filmed the walk across the lobby, she had filmed Marcus Cole's hand on his father's shoulder, she had filmed the words. She had not filmed Courtney Ashworth Lane's face, because she said later that it didn't feel right, that she was not trying to make something into content, just trying to capture something that she needed to have recorded because she was afraid she would not believe it later. She posted the clip at 1:17 p.m. By 3 o'clock it had 400,000 views. By 6 the number was in the millions. By the following morning every major news outlet in the country had run some version of the story, and the phrase "he had no idea who she really was" was trending on 3 platforms simultaneously. The comments were what you would expect, and also not what you would expect. There were people who were angry, and people who were moved. And people who told their own versions of this story from their own lives. The uncle who mopped floors and held a doctorate. The grandmother who cleaned hotels and had once been a schoolteacher. The father who drove a bus and read Chekhov on his lunch break. The thread of it ran very deep and very wide because this was not a rare story. It was only a rarely seen one. What was rarer was what happened next. Courtney Ashworth Lane's contract with Pinnacle Solutions, which was now technically and legally a contract with Cole Capital Group, was terminated that afternoon. This was handled quietly, in a room upstairs by people whose job it is to handle such things. The specific language of the termination cited a breach of professional conduct standards. The settlement amount was not disclosed. What was disclosed, later by 2 separate sources to 2 separate journalists, was that the termination had been initiated not by Marcus Cole, but by 3 of the sitting board members who had been in the lobby at noon, 2 of whom had also been in the lobby at 8:47, had seen what happened with the planner, and had said nothing. That was something they did not feel good about. The board commissioned an external review of the company's workplace culture. This was not a gesture. This was the kind of review with teeth, conducted by an independent firm with the ability to interview any staff member at any level confidentially. The review took 4 months. The findings were not entirely comfortable. They were published internally in full. Tanya, who had told Marcus Cole about the morning's incident, was promoted to senior administrative coordinator 3 weeks after the story broke. When asked about it by a reporter who managed to reach her by phone, she said she didn't think it had anything to do with the story. She was probably right. She had been doing the work of that position for years. 2 of the building's other maintenance workers, both of whom had been with the company for over 5 years, were given formal salary reviews. The reviews resulted in adjustments. The adjustments were significant. Ellington James was offered by his son a position as a non-executive consultant to Cole Capital Group. The position was real. The compensation was substantial. He declined it. He accepted, instead, a different offer. The brass medallion. This is the part of the story I want you to sit with for a moment. Because when Courtney Ashworth Lane dropped that planner into the soapy water, she did not know what she was dropping it near. The medallion was in the front pocket of the pressed blue jacket, 2 feet from where the planner hit the water. It didn't get wet. It was fine. But the gesture, the deliberate contemptuous release of the fingers, landed differently for Ellington than it would have for most people. Because the medallion is how his father spoke to him. That is the only way to say it. It is worn smooth on one side from being held, and on the other side there is a trumpet and 2 initials. And when Ellington pressed his thumb against it in the lobby that morning after she walked away, what he was doing was exactly what he had done every difficult day for 30 years. He was checking in. He was asking, "Did you see that?" And the answer that came back, from whatever place the dead occupy in the lives of people who loved them well, was the same answer it always was. The room moves. You don't. In the articles that followed, a journalist found an old photograph. It ran in a Sunday magazine piece that was later nominated for a feature writing award. The photograph was from 1959. It showed the interior of a club in the Fillmore district, the kind of club with low ceilings and round tables and a single spotlight on a small stage. In the spotlight was a trumpet player. He was young, 20-something, and his eyes were closed, and the expression on his face was the expression of a man playing something true. Beneath the photograph, the caption identified him as Robert Bobby James, and beside him, barely visible at the edge of the frame, half in shadow, sitting at a table with a glass of something, listening with the focused attention of a child who understood that what he was hearing mattered, was a boy. Ellington was 3 years old in that photograph. He would not have remembered it. But he was there. The journalist called it the most important detail in the whole story. He might have been right. 1 year later, the Robert James Music Education Initiative launched in October, funded by a founding gift from Cole Capital Group and supplemented by donations from nearly 400 individuals, several of them people who had commented on Priya's video from that lobby in November. The initiative provided music instruction to public school students in the Bayview and Excelsior neighborhoods of San Francisco. Neighborhoods that, like the Fillmore before them, had been quietly losing their cultural institutions for years. The first cohort was 42 students. The youngest was 6. The oldest was 16. The instrument of choice for 7 of them was the trumpet. The program director, a woman named Dr. Ida James Cooper, was a pediatrician in Oakland who had taken a leave of absence from her practice to run the initiative for its first 2 years. She said in an interview that her grandfather had taught her something she had tried to pass on to every patient she'd ever had, that the room moves around you. Your job is to keep playing. The initiative's logo was a trumpet. Ellington attended the first class. He sat in the back. He didn't say much. He watched a 6-year-old girl put a trumpet to her lips for the first time and produce a sound that was somewhere between a question and the beginning of an answer, and he pressed his thumb against the medallion in his front shirt pocket, and he was quiet for a very long time. When a reporter asked him afterward what he thought, he said, "My father would have been here earlier." He said it like it was funny. It also wasn't funny at all. You know, a lot of people, when they first see that clip Priya posted, the one from the lobby with Marcus Cole walking across the floor and putting his hand on his father's shoulder, focus on the moment the CEO speaks, on the words, on the reveal. They watch it for the reversal, for the power shift, for Courtney Ashworth Lane's face going still. And I understand that. That moment is real, and it matters, and it is genuinely something to see. But if this story moved you, and I hope it did, I hope it moved you like it moved me, I want you to share it, because the stories that don't get told are the ones that keep repeating. Subscribe if you want more, hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming, and tell me in the comments, have you ever stood in a room and been made invisible? Have you ever known something about a person that the room didn't know and watched them be diminished for it? Tell me what happened. I read every single one. Here is what really gets me about this story. And I've been sitting with it since I first came across it. It's not the reversal. The reversal is satisfying in the way that a sentence completing itself is satisfying, you were waiting for it, and it comes, and yes. Yes to all of it. But what really gets me is the 11 years. 11 years of coming in through the service entrance. 11 years of the pressed jacket and the methodical cart. 11 years of mopping floors in a building where no one knew or asked who he was when he left. And not one of those years was a performance. Not one of them was waiting. He was not in costume. He was not passing time. He was doing the work, the ministry, as his father said, as he said, with the same intention and seriousness as every other thing he had ever done. There is a word for that. I keep reaching for it. The closest I can get is something like integrity, but that's almost too clean. What Ellington James had was something that doesn't need an audience, something that doesn't need to be known to be real. He carried his father's medallion not as proof but as practice. He pressed his uniform not so anyone would notice, but because his father told him to, and his father was right. The woman in the cream coat looked at him and saw a category. She saw the uniform and the mop, and she decided in less than 10 seconds exactly who she was looking at. She was completely wrong. But here is the thing that I cannot stop thinking about. She would have been wrong even if he had been exactly who she assumed he was. The error was not the mistaken identity. The error was the looking. When was the last time you were looked at like that? When was the last time you looked at someone else like that? I'm not asking you to be hard on yourself. I'm asking you to be honest with me, right here, right now, in the comments. Because that is the only way any of this changes. Not one corporation at a time. Not one lobby, not one reversal, not one video that happens to go viral. It changes the way everything changes. In the small acts, in the individual moments, in the choice to look at a person fully rather than to see only the convenient outline of them. Ellington James carried his father's trumpet in his pocket for 30 years. He never once needed anyone to know it was there. What are you carrying that no one knows about? Tell me.